Hi, I'm Rick.
Hi, I'm Oscar.
Oscar, you've prepared something for SQL today, right?
Yes, I prepared something for SQL. We all know SQL Azure.
Yep.
That consists out of a SQL Server and a SQL database on it.
Yeah.
That's how we're used to setting that up. For today, I prepared something for, let's say high availability.
Okay.
So I wanted to do something with failover groups.
Mm-hmm.
I was on a project and we became aware that sometimes a region isn't doing what you expect it to do.
Unfortunately, yes.
And it happens. So failover groups is a built-in feature for Azure SQL. What you can do is have a backup in a different region. So normally SQL is already backed up, right? Your storage of your SQL servers can already be in a different region.
Yeah, and then I think also by default you have even 7 days of point in time restore, right?
Yeah, by default it's 7 these days. You can put it to 30 max, I think.
Yeah.
So also if the service comes back, you know it will come back the way you left it. But it would be nice to continue working, and it also has some advantages. And of course some extra cost, but
that's with all of the features, right? And that's actually something that I've been trying to get people to get a grasp on, that you can use all of those extras that Azure has to offer you, and use that to enrich your own licensing model for your own service. Since if this is a service that you're selling,
so yeah, what you can do is indeed, like if you're building this for a SaaS company. Then what you're saying, correct, you put them in the premium tenant, or you have their database replicated, while another customer is like, no, I'll just have the basic version.
I don't need that.
I don't need it, but then your customers get a different SLA, and Azure gives you all the components to set it up yourself.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at the screen, I'm here at a SQL. It's called BT SQL Server 001, and it has one database on it. It's called some database because I don't care what it is at this moment. It's just a demo. If you look at the left pane, we have something called failover groups here.
Yeah. I've seen that in several services actually.
Several services are having that, and they are. I think they're making this become more similar everywhere, as in different other services. So what you need to do is, like for instance, this SQL Server is in West Europe. And what do we want to do is create a failover group. And if you click here, add group, then you need to create a name for the failover group.
Yep.
You select the target server. Inline you can also create a new one. So what it needs to be, and that's most interesting, it needs to be in a different region.
Of course.
Yeah, you know. So if you would set up a group like that, and it will create the second or third or fourth copy. You can have in the same failover group multiple copies of it, and it will replicate your data there. It will provide you an endpoint to connect with, because your endpoint that you're used to is the DNS entry of your primary SQL server.
Yeah. So that something at database.windows.net, right?
Exactly that one. And you will get the same kind of URL build up, only it starts with your failover group name.
Okay.
So instead of your database name, it has your failover group name. The nice thing about that they're using that naming, a lot of us build some middleware, wrapping, stuff that's everywhere in your software.
Yeah.
And wouldn't be nice if you would then have to change that build up. Let's say it had some other DNS there. Like it's probably hard coded somewhere in some of the applications. So it's pretty transparent. Your application won't know the difference. What does this also mean is that the way you're connecting to it, it's using the same credentials. So your secondary server that you're creating needs the same set of credentials. To connect to. These days we're doing more with managed identity, of course, but still, if you're not doing that, be sure that has the same username and password than the other one.
Yeah, because before we had these failover groups and you wanted to implement something like this yourself, then you had to failover manually, but also that meant just switching really connection strings.
Because you are right. Yeah, you're picking up a different database that's from a copy or a backup. Like this is really a high availability feature. So what I want to show you first, because this database, of course, I create stuff with Bicep, you know me. Somehow I feel dirty to click around in the portal these days. So to get what we just saw here, I set a primary server and primary location. I put some of the params in a param file, just also not to share my object ID of my user here and like all kinds of things. So this is the server, primary server, so it's Microsoft.SQL, and then servers, and that's the Bicep template. And then everything that's mandatory, it will start popping up.
Yeah.
In this case, I use the Active Directory only admin, and that means that you need to fill in some things. So login is my full username. It needs an object ID, and like it needs some things. Next to that, you see the database. And the database is actually the SKU you're paying for, the tier you're paying for. So if you create just a server, it doesn't cost a thing. Like it's just an entry for a server.
It's a placeholder, right?
It's a placeholder. And this points back to server. I call it primary servers because I knew what I was going to do. And it is a standard S0 old DTU style.
10 DTU database.
Indeed.
Or maybe even 5, I don't know.
No, it's a 10, I think.
Yeah.
So first thing, what I need to do is create a secondary and maybe third one or fourth one, create different servers. And this is the exact same template as the primary one, of course. So I replicated all the data in there. I tried to actually do the administrator's thing and just use the code block that's in your resource. Didn't buy that.
No, okay.
So you see that sometimes in Bicep. It also approves it. It thinks it's fine, but on runtime it will throw an error because it's populated with some different data than you would expect. So create this one first. The secondary location is in this case North Europe, but it's in my params file. And what I'm going to do there, next to that, is create the failover group. And creating the failover group, we also have the template or the type under Microsoft SQL servers and then /failover groups. Yeah. So where you might try to find them.
It's pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. So it needs a name. I just appended the primary server name and then -fog failover group. I think it's nice if you need to, like in my projects, we're doing some automation inside the code because like every tenant has their own database. So you're using the management API then. And if you do a failover, you want to connect something, or you're doing an upgrade of someone that wasn't in a failover group and now is, it's nice to have some name convention there.
Well, it just like you said, it makes it easier to automate things, right? I mean, that's also why platforms like ASP.NET do a lot by convention, since that helps you just assume the default standard. And
so you can write some code to onto it to do some of this thing. In this case, it's fully Bicep, assuming you have one database really static and we replicate it. So the failover group is defined here. You give it a name. You give it a parent. Parent is the primary server, or what's going to be the primary at the moment. Because if you would do a failover, you swap things around, and then you create something or you add something called partner servers, and the partner servers are the remote ones. Also here, you would almost assume that I put the secondary server, so this resource in here. It will do it, throw an error in the portal once you publish the ARM template. So the ARM is all fine, the publish it, starts building, it's like, I don't know. Found out the hard way, of course.
Could you create the tertiary server as well, and then have one statement where you send to the failover group, hey, all of these servers need to be in the failover group?
If you look at this, I'll zoom in a bit even for video. Was this zoomed in? No,
it's this Control Plus the school doesn't use.
No, it's not working today. Somehow interesting. So zooming in, you see this is an array. So you can actually add multiple servers in one go. Also, this failover group is pretty stateful. So it can be, especially if you're automating, can be a bit tricky. Because what I also need to do is add the databases that I want to fail over. So it's not default that everything in the server gets failed over. You might have even multiple elastic pools on the server. You really need to make a copy of those as well in the other one. They need to be named the same, otherwise it doesn't know what to do with it.
That's a good thing.
It's a good thing, but the tricky part...
It makes stuff explicit, right? And
it makes stuff explicit, but using or creating a failover group like this, and if you would automate, for instance, putting extra databases because they got created, extra databases in, and you run this again, you know what's going to happen with this array.
Yeah, probably
it will unlink him.
Yeah, it will overwrite and only this one will be in place, right?
Yeah. Also found out the hard way that removing this whole block, you would assume at this moment that it would leave that alone.
Yeah, since we're not doing an explicit deployment.
Incremental deployment. Yeah, but because this is state, this is data for the thing, it will wipe it out.
That's good to know, actually.
Yes, it's good to know. I was trying around with this. Was like, let's double check if that happens, and it wouldn't be nice to, because it gets disconnected. And then you have two sets of servers. If the secondary one doesn't get written on, it's probably fine. And also if you run it again, it will pick it up. But it's a gotcha. What I'm going to do is just to show you in Portal what it's going to create. So what I'm doing here, AZ deployment, in the bottom you can see group create, and I'm gonna pointing to resource group and this file and my param file, and it should start creating this. So I need to upgrade my Bicep apparently. Yeah. But so it's gonna call it now in the portal just to show you in the portal. Of course, we're gonna go to the resource group because there we're putting the deployments.
Yep.
Just to see what's happening here. You see this is the deployment I just kicked off. It knows, gonna do something. The server's all right. It was already there. It's building the secondary now. It's double checking that it's using the database, and after the secondary, it will, because it's dependency on the group, it will pop up here a failover group deployment. So we need to wait for that for a minute.
Yeah, it might take some time, right? If we're creating SQL servers, then
yeah, that's proper state. So let's fast forward on that one.
Now we wait.
Hey Rick, it's done.
Cool.
So deployment is complete. If you look at the terminal, it also spit out all the details there.
Yep.
Let's go back in the portal to go to the resource group where the deployment was. Probably need to refresh here again. Oh no, yeah. So
there's still a bit of caching going on there, right? Sometimes
there's
you
still.
just need to refresh.
If you refresh like 10 times, it says, do you want to switch to the simplified view? It's probably lighter for them.
Really?
Yeah. Can I show you? That's going to be fun. Sometimes it really... You get this one, and said, yes, please. And this is real time. So this is a quicker...
Wow. So that's actually one that I haven't seen before. That's nice.
Yeah, I've seen it all the time because I'm apparently... lacking some patience. I don't know. But what are we talking about? So we had server 1, we had server 1 secondary, and the same for the database. So you see now we have twice as many databases, North and West Europe, so everything is there. Let's go to server 1 and we go to the failover groups. You can do that from both because they're connected to both.
Yeah.
We're going to go into the failover group. And what you actually can see is a really nice little picture of the whole world and a line there that it's replicating there. So just for a cool picture we could create a lot of ones to see how that looks, but not really important for the demo.
You can even use this as a location where you can add databases or remove databases.
This is indeed where you can change them. In this case we selected it, you saw that?
Yeah.
But if you would do it by hand, you can say, well, are there eligible databases? Not at the moment. But it also says this is the cost. So you have database at the other side now as well, so it replicates the exact same database.
Yeah.
It has the same cost. If you do that for an elastic pool, you can map them on slightly different but similar named elastic pools as long as the maximums are the same.
Okay.
So maybe you can, you're not using any resource there. So you can maybe, if you're using a really heavy one, you can tone it down a bit. For the DTU model, that is correct, but I don't know for sure if the vCore model works the same.
Okay.
You might have to be completely impaired there. So I don't know what you see here or what you don't see here, and that's because of my my extension. Let's turn that one off.
It's a great extension.
A great extension to hide some things, and this but also hides endpoints. So it will create the failover group endpoint on database.windows.net. And you get a second endpoint, and it's a read-only listener. So the fun part of that one is that you can actually use it. You're paying for the compute, so why not use it? Maybe you have reports in your application or some other backend scenario where you only need to read. That's awesome. What happens on a failover? So in this case, we put it on automatic. It has a grace period, and it will detect when something like a disaster is happening or the database is gone. Like, it will do an automatic failover for you. But you could also do the forced failover yourself. And what it will do is, in the end, this is the endpoints that we see here is just Azure Traffic Manager. So it will start dropping connections that are there. In my experience, pretty gracefully. I tested it a couple of times this week with an application. And it will just do a slot swap, actually. Like, it feels a bit like that.
Then for databases.
So if you see that happening, then your primary will be the one called secondary, but that's your naming. And it will continue working, and it's there. And once the other one's spinned up, it will also start replicating back again because your data has been written in the other zone. And if you then want, like, choose a nice moment in time to push them back, because you probably want to put them back. I did because if you have an actual application running on it and it's a bit chatty, you will incur some latency there.
Yeah, and not only latency, of course, because if your application runs in the same region as your database, and then you fail over the database, your database is in another region.
Yeah, but that latency mostly between those.
But also extra cost if you keep it there. Since it's two different regions, it's outgoing data, and if you pass the limit, then you're going to pay for that one as well.
Outgoing network traffic, it will also add. And I think the outgoing network traffic is manageable until a certain point between databases. Otherwise, you're doing really weird stuff in the database. You should do it in blob storage then, or just a lot.
Or Cosmos.
But what I saw is I went from West Europe to North Europe, and I did some graph in App Insights to see what are my dependency calls doing, and it gave me an offset of extra almost 15 milliseconds. And 15 milliseconds is in code that you never build. If you build code that wasn't never in the cloud, because in the cloud you already add some, then 15 milliseconds on some N+1 or whatever is horrible. Like, your application will be slow, but better than it's not there. So it's good, but you probably want to merge back to your original setting.
And it doesn't do that automatically, does it?
No. At the moment, I've never seen it working yet, but
I can also imagine that you might want to choose a period in time where
it will do traffic. That if the other region goes out. That's automatic.
Yeah, but otherwise, just you pick a time where you're low on traffic. Yeah,
you're low on traffic. Do this in a controlled manner, because what I saw also this week, what was happening, your endpoint will become read-only suddenly. After swapping. And even though it connects it, if your application, and we do that a lot, has some caching of, I need this server with that connection string, like we cache that application side a bit. And then you get the problem is, like, it reconnects. It's like, I'm gonna write the knotted log here, and it explodes.
Apparently I'm not.
Apparently you're not. And then you need to restart some applications to clear that cache. So knowing your application design is like, can I handle the latency? Test it, because it's really easy to test if you set it up.
This is something that you need to test every once in a while, right? Does it still function as I expected it will?
Does it have new features? Is everything configured like I expect? Well, Bicep helps you with that, because you just run it again. But a couple of things to know is indeed the latency, test it, know when to fail back again. Be aware of some client cache or some long-running connections there, because if you have something that's just plowing through data, and you would do the failover like, it's Monday morning 9 o'clock, like let's fail back, you might remove some users from your system. It's not nice. So pick a time that's graceful, and especially in the Bicep, what I learned is that overwriting it here and mixing that with an application that's using the management client, you're overriding state.
Yeah.
And that can be tricky.
Yeah, so that's a real gotcha that you exposed there that you should take into account.
Yeah, and also what I already said, we were doing something with the IDs, like secondary server ID explicitly. Just put the ID in here, otherwise it will approve it and give you a random error.
Yeah.
I think that those are most of the gotchas. Databases is a list of string, so you also see database.id, and that's the whole resource ID with the resource group /databases/ you know how to work. So that's what I learned from playing around with this and trying to implement it on scale. So use it in your benefit.
Maybe we should also do a session the first time you need to actually fail over, and then the lessons you've learned.
The lessons I've learned. Yeah, maybe the lessons I've learned is like watch the video, the previous one. That will be awesome. But probably we have new insights by then.
But I hope, for your sake, that it's not for a while before we actually need to.
I hope it will never fail over. That's my primary.
Cool.
Yeah, so that was it for me.
Thanks. Very interesting. Thank you for watching. See you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.